Ma'am, this section is for actual business owners, not whatever you are. The words sliced through the air before Maya Johnson could even sit down. She froze for a second, blinking in disbelief, as the man across from her leaned back in his leather chair with the ease of someone who'd never been challenged. His nameplate read, Daniel Hart, Senior Loan Officer, Grand Crest Bank. His office looked like the kind of place where old money felt safe. A mahogany desk, framed photos from golf tournaments, a Yale diploma that gleamed under the light of an antique lamp. Every inch of it whispered one thing: power. Maya, dressed in a plain hoodie and well-worn sneakers, didn't look like the clients he usually met. But the folder in her hands told a different story. 20 pages of business projections, neatly printed, perfectly bound. Years of planning, sleepless nights, and quiet determination lived between those pages. She placed the folder in front of him, sliding it carefully across the desk. He didn't even touch it. Instead, he opened his drawer and pulled out something crumpled, a fast food job application. He smoothed it out casually, then pushed it toward her with a smirk. Maybe start here first, he said, chuckling as if he'd just made the joke of the year. Work your way up. His laugh echoed across the marble-floored lobby, loud enough for nearby customers to turn and stare. For a moment, Maya couldn't move. Her throat tightened, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. She reached for the folder, trying to steady her hands. As she gathered her papers, one item slipped out. A metallic black credit card that caught the light as it hit the floor. A Centurion card. The banker's eyes flicked toward it, but he said nothing. He was already lifting his phone. Linda? Yeah, it's Daniel. Still on for golf Saturday? He swiveled his chair away from her, already laughing again. Maya knelt to pick up the card, her fingers brushing against the cold floor. The boarding pass beside it read First Class, Paris. She collected everything silently, stood and turned to leave. But as she walked away, a single thought echoed in her mind. He has no idea who he just humiliated, and in 72 hours, he was going to find out. The humiliation hadn't started in his office. It began the moment Maya walked into the bank. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. Sunlight poured through the glass doors of Grand Crest Financial, lighting up the golden letters that spelled out a century-old name. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polish and perfume. Paintings of stern-faced men in suits lined the walls, the founding fathers of the institution. Maya approached the reception desk, holding her appointment confirmation email. Hi, I have a 2:30 appointment with Daniel Hart. The woman behind the desk, a blonde in pearls, didn't look up right away. She was scrolling through her phone, scheduling what sounded like a nail appointment. When she finally glanced up, her smile didn't reach her eyes. And you are? Maya Johnson, she replied, steady. I'm here about a business acquisition loan. The woman's gaze traveled slowly over Maya's outfit. The hoodie, the sneakers, the lack of designer logos. Then she gave a small, rehearsed laugh. Are you sure you have the right place, sweetie? There's a check cashing service down the street. A quiet anger coiled in Maya's chest, but she kept her tone calm. This is the right place. $2.5 million acquisition loan. The receptionist blinked, then frowned at her screen as if trying to verify it. After a pause, she sighed. Take a seat. He'll call you when he's ready. Maya waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 27. In that time, she watched at least 4 other clients arrive, all white, all in sharp suits, and every single one was ushered straight to a meeting. A man wearing a Rolex walked in after her and was immediately invited back with a warm handshake. By the time the receptionist finally called her name, Maya had memorized the rhythm of that clicking keyboard, the sound of quiet exclusion. When she entered Daniel Hart's office, she already knew what kind of man he was. She just didn't know yet how far he'd go to prove it. He stood as she walked in, tall and confident in a perfectly tailored suit. Maya, right? She smiled faintly. It's Maya. He waved dismissively toward the chair opposite his desk. Right, so what kind of business are we talking about here? She placed the folder down. Bridge financing for the final phase of an acquisition. The company we're purchasing manages over $8 billion in assets. His eyebrows rose slightly. Then the smirk returned. $8 billion, huh? He didn't touch the folder. Didn't read a word. Instead, he leaned back, fingers pressed together, voice dripping with condescension. Look, Maya, our institution deals with established clients. Families, long-standing businesses. We have standards. Expectations. The word expectations hung in the air like a taunt. She tilted her head. And what expectations would those be? Well, he said, gesturing lazily at her outfit. For starters, our clients don't usually shop at Target. There was a pause, a long, loaded silence that spoke volumes. And that's when Maya noticed something. A young black woman across the lobby, pretending to fill out a deposit slip, but subtly holding up her phone. The red recording light was on. Maya's pulse steadied. She looked Daniel right in the eye and said quietly, "I understand perfectly. What?" Daniel didn't understand was that one act of arrogance had just set off a chain reaction that would change his world forever. Because Maya Johnson wasn't just any woman seeking a loan. She was the CEO of a private investment group that had been quietly buying pieces of his bank for months. And in 3 days, the same woman he humiliated would own the very building he sat in. But for now, she simply picked up her folder, her card, and her dignity, and walked out the door without another word. Maya stepped out of the revolving doors and into the sharp winter air. The sky above the city was pale and cold, but her thoughts burned. She walked to her car, every step echoing against the marble steps of the bank that had just humiliated her. The city noise faded into the background as her mind replayed every second of that meeting. The sneer in Daniel's voice, the dismissive glance, the laughter. Inside her car, the world fell silent. She rested her hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Then a soft tap came at her window. It was the young woman from inside. She looked barely 20, dressed in a student's jacket, her phone still in her hand. "Miss, I got the whole thing," she said. "Everything he said. I recorded it. You want me to post it?" Maya studied her. The girl's eyes were fierce, angry, but hopeful too. The kind of hope that believed the internet could fix injustice overnight. "What's your name?" Maya asked. "Keisha. I go to Hudson State. I bank here, but after that..." She shook her head, disgusted. Maya reached for her business card. It was plain white, clean, no logo, no design. Just her name and company, MJ Holdings Group. She handed it through the window. "Send me a copy, then post it. Make sure people see exactly what happened in there." Keisha nodded. "They will." As the girl walked away, Maya's phone was already in her hand. She scrolled to a number saved under a single letter. "D. Davies," she said when the line picked up. Her voice was calm now, measured. "I want to accelerate the Grand Crest acquisition." "Full position! Full position!" her legal counsel repeated. "We're still in due diligence, Maya. You said we'd wait until Q3. Plans have changed. How quickly can we move?" 3 days if we move aggressively," Davies replied. "May I ask what's driving this?" She looked up at the glass facade of the bank, where the same marble pillars that had once symbolized power now looked fragile in her eyes. "Call it a business opportunity." That night, Keisha's video went live. The clip was 46 seconds long. It showed Daniel's sneer, the casual insult, the crumpled fast food application sliding across the desk. It caught the tone in his voice, the way he mispronounced her name, the way he laughed while turning away. Within an hour, the video hit 10,000 views. By midnight, it had crossed 100,000. Comments flooded in, stories from other people who had faced the same quiet, smiling discrimination. "This happened to me at my local branch. They told me to try the urban branch instead. They said my restaurant idea was too risky for my neighborhood." By dawn, it had reached nearly 500,000 views. Grand Crest Financial was trending under a single brutal hashtag, banking while black. Inside his penthouse apartment, Daniel woke to the sound of his buzzing phone. At first he thought it was just another notification, then another, and another. His LinkedIn profile had been tagged. His name was circulating on social media alongside the words "racist banker." He scrolled, panic rising in his chest. There he was, his voice, his smirk, his laugh, his face. The comments section was a firestorm. Thousands of people calling for his firing, others digging through his professional history. Someone had even found his family's Facebook photos. Down in the city, in a very different kind of office, Maya watched the same video in silence. Her team sat around a long conference table covered in digital screens and open laptops. Every one of them had seen the footage by now. "Do we make a public statement?" asked her chief of communications. Maya shook her head. "No need. Let the truth speak first." Her CFO leaned forward. Stock prices are dropping fast. The video's spooking investors. Then buy more, she said simply. Every dip is a discount. Across town, Grand Crest Financial's headquarters was in chaos. The VP of Operations, Carol Stevens, rushed into Daniel's office, her phone pressed to her ear. "What in the world were you thinking?" she demanded. "I didn't know she was recording," he stammered. "She didn't look like she had that kind of money." "I mean, look at her," Carol cut him off. "Do you hear yourself? We're facing federal investigation material, Daniel. You may have just cost us millions in lawsuits." His phone buzzed again. Another notification. This time it wasn't just his name trending. It was his address. His child's school. His personal information had leaked. By noon, protesters had begun gathering outside the bank's main branch. News vans parked along the street. Reporters shouted questions as customers hurried past. Meanwhile, in a glass-walled conference room high above the chaos, the board of Grand Crest convened an emergency meeting. The president, Mark Dalton, looked exhausted. His tie was loose, his jaw tight. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we have a full-blown crisis. The video has surpassed 1 million views. We're being contacted by regulators, journalists, and civil rights organizations, and our stock is down 13% in pre-market trading." One of the board members, a woman in a silver suit, asked, "What's our exposure?" "Legal says potential civil rights violations." "The optics alone are devastating." Dalton turned toward Daniel, sitting pale at the far end of the table. "You're suspended. Effective immediately." Daniel's voice shook. "This is being blown out of proportion." "I was just silent," Dalton snapped. Not another word. The boardroom fell into uneasy silence until an assistant entered, whispering something into Dalton's ear. His expression changed from anger to disbelief. "What now?" asked a board member. "The woman in the video," Dalton said slowly. "Maya Johnson, she's requesting a meeting with the full board tomorrow morning." A murmur rippled through the room. "What for?" someone asked. She didn't say, but she insists it's not about an apology. She said, and I quote, "I'm interested in results." Dalton set his phone on the table. For the first time that morning, a flicker of unease crossed his face. He'd handled market crashes, legal suits, even mergers gone wrong. But something about Maya Johnson's calm voice unsettled him. Victims usually sounded angry, desperate for compensation. This one sounded like she was holding all the cards. And as he stared out the window at the growing crowd of protesters below, one thought crossed his mind. This wasn't a PR disaster. This was a reckoning. Because sometimes the person you underestimate most doesn't just come back for revenge. They come back to buy your entire world. The next morning, the tension inside Grand Crest's marble halls was heavy enough to taste. Security guards stood near every door. Reporters crowded the sidewalk outside, and employees whispered like the building itself had betrayed them. At exactly 10 o'clock, the elevator doors slid open and Maya Johnson stepped out. She wasn't wearing a designer suit. She didn't arrive with fanfare. She wore a simple gray blazer over a black turtleneck, her hair tied neatly back, her face calm. But the stillness around her was electric. Behind her walked two people, her legal counsel, Sarah Mitchell, and her chief financial officer, Robert Evans, both dressed sharply, their steps measured. The receptionist who had mocked her the day before sat frozen behind the same desk. Her manicured fingers hovered over the keyboard, but no words came out this time. Maya didn't even glance her way. She went straight through the main hall toward the conference room at the end of the corridor, where every member of the Grand Crest board was already waiting. Mark Dalton stood as she entered. "Ms. Johnson," he began, "we want to sincerely—" Maya raised a hand gently. "Let's skip the apology. I think there's something more productive we can do with our time." Her tone was steady, polite, but there was a quiet authority beneath it that filled the entire room. She turned slightly to Sarah, who handed a single document across the table. Mark took it, frowning as he scanned the first page. Then his expression changed, first confusion, then disbelief, then the pale realization of what the words meant. "This says, MJ Holdings Group has acquired controlling interest of Grand Crest Bank?" Maya nodded once. "As of 9:47 this morning, my firm owns 51.4% of your outstanding common stock." A stunned silence fell. One of the older board members leaned forward. "That's impossible. We'd have been notified." Sarah spoke for the first time, calm and precise. We filed the disclosure documents 13 minutes ago, perfectly within federal regulation. Mark stared down at the paper in his hands. You own the bank? Maya's expression didn't change. Yes, you all work for me now. The words landed like thunder in that silent room. Daniel Hart, sitting near the corner, looked like he was trying to sink into his chair. You can't just buy a bank overnight, he blurted. Maya turned her gaze toward him. I didn't. I've been buying it piece by piece for months. I only decided yesterday to finish the job. She walked toward the tall windows overlooking the city skyline. Sunlight reflected off the buildings, casting a golden glow that painted the room in sharp contrast to its tension. Grandcrest was already on my list, she continued. Declining performance, poor leadership, outdated technology, and systemic discrimination in lending practices. Yesterday simply confirmed that my analysis was correct. Mark rubbed his temples. You came in here yesterday to test us. I came here for a legitimate loan, she said. But you showed me something better. Proof of exactly what's wrong with your institution. Robert Evans placed a tablet on the table, flicking it on to reveal a series of charts and reports. We've reviewed your internal data. Approval rates for minority-owned businesses are 31%. The industry average is 68%. You've left hundreds of millions in potential revenue untouched. One of the board members scoffed. That's a complex issue. We've always prioritized risk management. Risk management? Maya repeated softly. You mean profiling. She took her seat at the end of the table, the same spot where so many powerful men had once made decisions that excluded people like her. Let's not pretend this is complicated. It's discrimination dressed up as policy. Mark leaned forward, struggling to regain control of the room. What exactly do you want from us? Maya folded her hands together. Transformation. The board exchanged uneasy glances. You have 3 options, she continued. Resign with dignity and walk away with full severance. Stay and commit to change under new diversity and ethics guidelines. Or resisting, and I will liquidate the entire institution by Friday evening. The room erupted in whispers. Someone muttered about lawyers. Another demanded to speak to the SEC. Maya didn't raise her voice, but when she spoke again, the noise stopped. I have evidence, she said simply. Thousands of denied loan applications. Emails referencing cultural fit. Memos discussing demographics as risk factors. It's all documented. If you fight this, you won't just lose your jobs. You'll lose everything attached to your names. Daniel's voice cracked. You're threatening us? She turned her eyes on him again, the faintest smile touching her lips. No, Daniel. I'm giving you a choice. Sarah opened a folder and placed another document on the table, an old photograph, slightly faded, showing a young black man standing in front of a bank with a file in his hand. Maya looked at it for a moment before speaking. That man is my father. He applied for a home loan at this bank in 1989. He was denied, not because he lacked credit or collateral, but because the officer didn't think a black family belonged in that neighborhood. Mark looked down at the photograph and froze. That loan officer? That was my father, Maya nodded. Yes, Thomas Dalton? Senior Vice President of Residential Lending. The same man who told my father, maybe you'd be more comfortable somewhere else. The air in the room changed. No one spoke. No one moved. Maya's voice stayed calm, steady. My father never got that house. But he built a life anyway. He fought discrimination in courtrooms until the day he died. I'm not here for revenge, Mr. Dalton. I'm here for something your father never gave mine. A fair chance. She stood, the city skyline blazing behind her. You've spent a century building walls around wealth. I intend to build doors. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mark finally whispered, What do you plan to do with us? That depends, she said. Do you want to be part of the future or the past? The question hung in the air like judgment itself. Outside the boardroom, the chants from protesters grew louder, echoing up through the glass walls. Maya glanced toward the noise, then back at the people who had spent their lives holding the keys to the system. At 5 o'clock, she said quietly, I'll expect your answers. And with that, she turned and walked out, leaving a silence so deep it felt like the end of an era. The doors closed behind her with a soft click. And for the first time in 127 years, Grandcrest Bank no longer belonged to the people who built it. It belonged to the woman they tried to turn away. By 5 o'clock that evening, the entire top floor of Grandcrest Bank felt like it was holding its breath. The boardroom lights glowed dimly over silent faces. Papers scattered across the table like remnants of an empire. One by one, the executives who had ruled this building for decades walked into Maya's new office. The same one that had belonged to Mark Dalton just hours earlier. The first came quietly. Carol Stevens, the vice president of operations, clutching a resignation letter. She placed it on Maya's desk. "I can't undo what's already been done," she said softly. "But I want to help fix what's broken." Maya looked up at her. "Then you're not resigning," she said. "You're staying." One by one, the others followed. Some angry, some humbled, some silent. By the end of the evening, 7 had chosen to leave. The rest stayed, not out of loyalty, but out of a dawning understanding that the world had changed, and they either changed with it or vanished. That night, as the city lights flickered beyond the glass walls, Maya stood alone at the window, watching the reflection of her own face over the skyline. She thought of her father, of the day he'd walked out of this same building, carrying the weight of quiet rejection that had shaped the rest of his life. Now, she stood where he had once been denied, and she owned it. The next morning began the transformation. Maya's new leadership team assembled in what used to be the executive lounge. Gone were the portraits of the bank's founders. In their place hung a large whiteboard filled with her handwriting, plans, timelines, and targets that reached far beyond profit. "Step 1, she said. "We rebuild trust." Robert Evans projected the first set of figures on the wall. "We're allocating $50 million to launch a new initiative, the Grand Crest Equity Fund, dedicated to financing minority-owned small businesses. Lower interest rates, transparent approval processes, no cultural fit criteria." Maya nodded. "We'll rebuild our reputation not with press releases but with results." She turned to Carol. "You're leading the Community Investment Division. You'll personally review every business loan application until our bias metrics hit 0. Carol blinked. "Personally?" "Yes," Maya said. "I want every name, every story, every denial on your desk. I want you to see the people behind the numbers." The team took notes furiously. Next came technology. Maya leaned forward. "Every conversation between a loan officer and a client will be recorded and analyzed by our new bias detection software. Language, tone, approval patterns, everything. If a pattern of discrimination appears, it triggers an internal review immediately." There was a murmur around the room. One executive whispered, "That's never been done before." Maya looked at him. "Then we'll be the first." By the end of the week, the old institution was unrecognizable. The marble lobby that had once radiated intimidation was stripped of its gold lettering. The portraits of the founders were moved into storage. In their place, 2 new photographs appeared side by side. One of Thomas Dalton, the former vice president who had denied her father's mortgage, and one of James Johnson, Maya's father, standing on the same steps outside the bank with his rejected application in hand. Underneath them, a single plaque read, "History doesn't repeat itself when we choose to rewrite it." The gesture sent ripples through the financial world. Journalists filled the lobby, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Some called it the most radical banking reform of the decade. Others called it chaos. But everyone was talking. Inside, the work never stopped. Maya met with her staff daily, listening to every concern, every suggestion. She wasn't a distant executive issuing orders. She was there in the meetings, in the branches, shaking hands with tellers, sitting beside customers, filling out new loan applications. She wanted the people who had once been ignored to feel the difference. 2 weeks later, the transformation reached the boardroom. The new leadership team gathered again, and Robert Evans displayed a fresh set of numbers. Since the acquisition, minority business lending is up 120%. Customer satisfaction scores have risen from 2.1 to 4.3. And our investor confidence rating has stabilized. The room buzzed with disbelief. Maya smiled faintly. "You see, doing the right thing isn't bad business. It's just been bad leadership." In the months that followed, Grand Crest became the blueprint for change. Financial institutions across the country started re-examining their own practices, afraid of becoming the next viral headline, or Maya's next acquisition. Even Daniel Hart's name became a warning whispered in corporate training sessions. "Don't pull a Hart," they said, meaning don't let arrogance destroy your institution. As for Maya, she didn't celebrate. She worked tirelessly, quietly. Her mission wasn't revenge. It was reconstruction. Each morning she walked through the lobby and paused before the photographs of her father and Thomas Dalton. Two men divided by history, united now by consequence. One morning she found Mark Dalton standing there too. He had chosen to stay, trading his title of president for a new one, Chief Operations Officer. His salary had dropped, his authority had shrunk, but his respect for her had grown into something solid and real. He looked at the photographs for a long time. He didn't know, Mark said finally. My father, I mean. He didn't see what he was doing. Maya's voice was quiet. He saw, he just didn't care. Mark nodded slowly. Then I'll make sure we do better this time. She glanced at him. Then start today. By the 6th month, the results were undeniable. The new Grand Crest Bank had transformed from a symbol of exclusion into a model of equity. Minority staff made up nearly half the workforce. Loan approvals had tripled in underserved communities. The same people who once felt invisible now had seats at the table and power in their hands. When Forbes published its annual report on industry innovation, the headline read, "The Bank That Bought Its Own Redemption," and beneath it, a photo of Maya Johnson, standing in that once forbidden lobby, her expression calm and unshaken. The words beneath the image simple, from rejection to revolution. Yet even with success blooming all around her, Maya knew this was only the beginning, because when you change one institution, others start to tremble, and she was already looking at her next target. She turned to her assistant. Get me the files on Hamilton and First, she said. They're next. Her assistant hesitated. That's another old bank, isn't it? Same structure, same patterns? Maya smiled, a calm fire behind her eyes. Exactly the same. As the skyline glowed in the evening light, she knew the message was spreading far beyond her city. You can't stop justice when it wears a suit, speaks the language of business, and owns the very walls that once shut it out. What had started as a viral moment of humiliation had become a blueprint for power, and Maya was just getting started. 2 years later, the skyline of New York gleamed with new towers and new names. But the biggest change couldn't be seen in glass or steel. It was in the air, in the conversations that happened inside boardrooms, classrooms, and crowded coffee shops. People were still talking about the Grand Crest turnaround, how a single woman had taken a moment of humiliation and turned it into an industry-wide reckoning. Inside her Manhattan office, Maya sat at her desk reviewing another acquisition proposal. The logo on the top of the document read, Hamilton and First Savings and Loan, a small southern bank with a familiar history, quiet redlining, biased lending and declining trust. Her assistant, a young Latina woman named Sophia, walked in holding a tablet. You should see this, she said, smiling. The new diversity report from Grand Crest just came in. Maya took the tablet. The numbers glowed on the screen. Minority business lending up 200%. Customer satisfaction at an all-time high. Employee diversity across all levels nearing 50%. She set the tablet down and smiled. Tell Mark he's outdone himself, Sophia hesitated. He's already in the lobby. He wanted to tell you in person. A moment later, Mark Dalton stepped into the office carrying a file and the familiar air of quiet humility that had replaced his old corporate bravado. You might want to see this one yourself, he said, handing her a newspaper. The front page showed a photo of a family standing in front of a small restaurant. The headline read, Local business grows thanks to Grand Crest's new equity initiative. Maya scanned the story. It was the Rodriguez family, the same family whose lawsuit against Grand Crest had once exposed discriminatory lending years earlier. Their restaurant had not only survived, but expanded to 3 new locations with the help of a Grand Crest business loan. They've hired 40 people, Mark said, all from their neighborhood. They wanted to thank you personally. Maya looked up from the page. Then thank them for proving that equality and profitability aren't opposites. Mark smiled faintly. You're making this a movement, Maya shook her head. No, Mark, I'm just proving something simple, that fairness isn't charity. It's good business. He leaned against the chair across from her. Hamilton and First, are we really going after them next? Yes, she said. They're showing the same symptoms Grand Crest did before the fall. Arrogance dressed up as policy. Mark nodded, thoughtful. You've changed how people see banking. Maya, that's not an easy thing. Then let's make sure it lasts, she said quietly. That afternoon, She visited the Grand Crest headquarters for the first time in months. The marble lobby, once cold and unwelcoming, now hummed with life. Customers of every background stood in line. The walls displayed new murals, faces of small business owners, families, and students the bank had helped. In the center of the lobby stood Keisha, the young woman whose video had started it all. She was now the director of community outreach, holding an orientation for new customers. When she spotted Maya, her face lit up. "Ms. Johnson, we just launched the financial literacy program today. Our first 100 students signed up before lunch." Maya grinned. "That's faster than any merger I've ever done." Keisha laughed. "We're calling it the Credit Confidence Project. We teach young people how to understand credit, build businesses, and fight for their financial power. We even post lessons online. How's it doing?" Maya asked. Keisha showed her phone. 500,000 followers. And counting. Maya paused, taking in the sight of the once intimidating space now filled with people who looked comfortable, welcomed, seen. "You've turned this place into what it should have been all along. Because you gave us the chance," Keisha said. But Maya shook her head. "No, Keisha. You gave it life." That night, as the city glittered outside her car window, Maya scrolled through her phone. Her feed was full of videos, all connected to her movement. A woman in Chicago showing her new bakery funded by a fair loan. A single father in Atlanta, thanking the new policy that approved his mortgage. A teenager in Detroit explaining how he'd opened his first savings account. Each story began the same way. This time they said yes. It wasn't a revolution with banners or protests. It was quieter, steadier. It was power shifting hands, not by force but by fairness. When Forbes called her the architect of modern banking, Maya declined the interview. She didn't want to talk about herself. She wanted to talk about the people who had been told no all their lives, and finally learned to say yes to themselves. Meanwhile, Daniel Hart, the man who had once handed her that crumpled job application, was still in Queens. He worked at a small community credit union now, processing small business loans under the supervision of a young black manager named Jasmine. He didn't talk much about his past. Most of his new co-workers only knew him as Mr. Hart, the man who typed quietly, kept his head down, and never raised his voice. But every now and then, he'd see a customer come in wearing sneakers, holding a folder full of dreams, and his throat would tighten. He would make sure their papers were reviewed first. He would say, "You're approved." And sometimes, when he walked home through the narrow streets at dusk, he would think about the woman he'd once tried to belittle, the woman who had turned his arrogance into her empire. For him, it was a lifetime lesson. For Maya, it was only momentum, because every success was a seed, and every system that had once been designed to exclude her was slowly being rewritten. By her hand. Her phone buzzed. A message from Sophia. Hamilton and First Board approved the merger. Papers are ready for signature tomorrow. Maya smiled to herself, gazing out at the skyline. One more step. One more door opened. One more system changed from the inside out. This wasn't just business anymore. This was justice disguised as strategy. And as the night settled over the city, she whispered to herself, "We're just getting started." The next morning broke with a soft gray light that painted the city in silver. Maya stood by the window of her new office at Hamilton and First, the ink still drying on the final acquisition papers. Outside, the streets moved with their usual rhythm, people rushing, horns blaring, life unfolding. But she felt something different in the air, a quiet sense of history turning its page. This bank, like Grand Crest before it, had spent a century protecting the same few and excluding the many. Today, that cycle ended. Inside the main lobby, a handful of employees lingered, whispering as Maya walked through the double doors. The walls still carried the old portraits, stern men in oil paintings watching her as if their gaze could reclaim authority. She stopped before the largest portrait, the founder of the bank, and studied the brass plate beneath his name. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she looked at her assistant. "Take them all down. We'll hang community art instead. Faces that look like the city we serve." The assistant nodded. Right away. By noon, the walls were bare. That afternoon, Maya called an all-staff meeting. The room was packed. Tellers, managers, analysts, and longtime executives who weren't sure whether to be afraid or inspired. She stood at the center, No notes in her hands, no script, just presence. When I was denied a loan, she began, her voice steady. I told myself something I've never forgotten. If you can't change the system from the outside, buy it and change it from within. That's what we're doing here. We're not destroying history. We're correcting it. A ripple of quiet filled the room. People were listening not because they were required to, but because they wanted to. This bank will no longer measure worth by background or surname or neighborhood. We'll measure it by potential, by vision, by grit. Because wealth should never be limited by who you are. It should be built by what you do. The applause started small, hesitant, then grew into something powerful. For the first time, the air inside Hamilton and First didn't feel heavy. It felt alive. Later that week, Maya was invited to speak before Congress. They called it a hearing on equitable banking practices. But everyone knew what it really was, an acknowledgement that her movement had changed everything. Under the bright lights of the chamber, she told her story. She spoke about the humiliation, the video, the acquisitions, and the data that had forced an industry to confront its own reflection. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Truth had its own volume. When she finished, one of the senators leaned forward. Ms. Johnson, do you believe systemic bias in finance can ever truly be eliminated? Maya met his gaze. Bias is human, but accountability is too. When systems are transparent, when power has mirrors instead of walls, change stops being temporary. It becomes culture. The room fell silent. Cameras clicked. History recorded another moment. That night, back in her Manhattan office, Maya sat alone under the low hum of the city lights. The desk was nearly empty except for 3 items she always kept close. Her father's rejected mortgage application from 1989. The crumpled fast food job application that had once been slid across a desk in mockery. And a small photo of Keisha, standing in front of the Grand Crest branch now covered in murals of thriving local businesses. Maya reached out and traced her father's name on the faded document. We did it, she whispered. Her phone buzzed again. It was Mark sending a short message. National Community Reinvestment Coalition just announced new lending standards. Based on your model, she smiled. Our model, she typed back. Outside, the world was changing faster than anyone had predicted. Banks across the country were adopting bias detection systems. Financial literacy programs were spreading through schools. New entrepreneurs were rising from neighborhoods once ignored. The change wasn't loud. It was steady, practical, inevitable. And in quiet offices everywhere, executives who once thought themselves untouchable now asked the same question in hushed tones. Could we be next? Maya looked out over the city, her reflection caught in the glass beside the night lights of 1,000 offices. For a moment she thought of her father again, the man who had fought through law and logic to make the world fairer. He had believed change came through courts and legislation. She had found a different way. Change, she realized, didn't always come from protests or anger. Sometimes it came from patience, from paperwork, from persistence that turned exclusion into ownership. She leaned back, exhaled, and smiled softly to herself. Somewhere out there, a woman or man was being told no at another polished desk. She hoped they would hear her voice in their hearts, because the most powerful response to "you don't belong here" would always be the same. Actually, I own here. And as the clock on her desk ticked into a new hour, Maya closed her laptop and whispered into the quiet room. Next, the city outside glowed brighter. The world at last had learned her lesson.